At Alcoa's Warrick operations, safety gets top priority. For one vital reason, we want all employees who work here to return home each day in the same physical condition in which they came to work. Warrick operations will continue to pursue a safety goal of 0 injuries. This goal can only be achieved if you do your part through hard work and constant attention to proper procedures. Your contribution to a safe work environment is essential. Remember, you are responsible for your own safety. It is our policy that all Craftpersons participate in this safety orientation annually. Your name and clock number will be kept on file. While this presentation does not cover all safety aspects of working at Warrick operations, it is intended as an overview of our safety requirements. When performing construction activities, also please note that all federal and state regulations that apply must be followed. Your employer is responsible for giving you this information and all appropriate training. This video was produced to help orient contract employees, as well as Alcoa employees, to the special hazards that can exist while performing construction-type work. While some of this footage may show non-Alcoans, don't be misled into thinking that only construction personnel need to be alert to these unique safety concerns. Many of our jobs require specific permits. There are digging permits, hot work permits, confined spaces work permits, and permits to use powder-actuated tools. Be sure you have the proper permit before starting the job. Never begin work in an operating area without first making sure that appropriate operating personnel know what you will be doing. Take precautions at shift changes so that oncoming operating people also know what you are doing. One of the most valuable tools in our safety program is the pre-job review checklist. In many areas of the plant, completion of this review is required prior to the start of work. Whether this is a requirement in your area or not, it is a good way to ensure that all potential hazards are identified before work begins. If used properly, it can help identify all potential safety hazards that may be encountered in a specific job. To be effective, all people involved in the project, including representatives from engineering, production, maintenance, outside contractors, safety, industrial hygiene, plant protection, and environmental, should participate in the process. By utilizing a checklist format, all potential hazards are given consideration. The meeting results are to be documented so that all persons on the project will be able to review these notes prior to starting work. Your safety also depends on wearing the proper personal protective equipment. All personal protective equipment must meet the applicable ANSI standards for PPE. While working at Warrick operations, you need a non-metallic Class B hard hat and safety glasses with rigid side shields. Shoes must be leather steel-toed with metatarsal guards. Hearing protection is also required in many areas. The task you are performing may also require hearing protection to be worn. You should always wear the appropriate gloves to protect your hands from lacerations, rough surfaces, chemicals, and heat. Here at Warrick operations, the intent of the cutting and welding PPE policy is to establish minimum PPE requirements to prevent clothing fires while performing oxyacetylene cutting or similar gas cutting, arc cutting, and arc welding. 2 layers of clothing are required on the upper torso, with the inner layers being either natural fiber or flame retardant material. The outer layer, just below the waist and up, must be flame retardant and must extend from the neck to the wrist and must be closed at the wrist. The neck must be either protected by an inner layer or the outer layer of clothing. An approved welding hood with a hard hat or flame retardant hat must be used when arc welding or arc cutting. Approved goggles or face shield with a hard hat or flame retardant hat must be used when performing oxyacetylene or similar gas cutting. Manufacturer's approved welding gloves must be worn. Outer leg covering must be natural fiber or flame retardant. If made of natural fiber, Leather spats must be worn over the pant legs just above the top of the boots. Rubberized rain suits and flammable paper suits are not to be worn when cutting or welding. When chemical protection from the environment is required, it must be accomplished using flame-resistant materials, provided it is worn over other flame-retardant materials. As a reminder, in the ingot and pot room areas, where there is a high potential for molten metal contact, wear outer garments of FR8, FR9, or other approved flame-retardant material protection. It is recommended that you wear inner garments made of 100% cotton. Long-sleeve shirts are also mandatory in molten metal areas. In certain exposures, you may need rubber gloves, boots, rain suits, respirators, and face shields. Finger rings and dangling jewelry are not permitted. They could catch on machinery or equipment and cause a serious, painful injury. Shoulder length or longer hair must be tucked into the hard hat to prevent entanglement with machinery or equipment. Good housekeeping goes hand in hand with accident protection. By keeping your work area clean and orderly, you protect yourself and your co-workers from tripping hazards and other potential accidents. All employees who work on this site are responsible for keeping their work areas organized and uncluttered. A general rule is, what goes down in a shift comes up in the same shift. Be sure to immediately report all accidents, injuries, and injury-free events to your supervisor. As you work, always be prepared for emergencies by knowing where you are. Be able to identify the building number, the column number, or the description of equipment. Equally important, find the telephone nearest your work site. In emergencies, call 4333. Give your location and the nature of the emergency. Remain on the phone until instructed by the plant protection officer that you may hang up. Defective equipment can cause serious accidents. That's why inspecting your tools and equipment before use is so important. If your tools and equipment are defective, turn them in for repair or replacement. Operate tools, machinery, or equipment only after you've been properly trained. Use them only for their intended purpose, and use them only if they're properly guarded. Defective equipment is often the cause of electrical shock accidents. Inspect electrical hand tools, extension cords, and other electrical equipment before use. All electrical-powered tools are to be either double insulated, properly grounded, or utilize a ground fault interrupter. Only low-velocity powder-actuated tools can be used. Only trained and certified personnel are permitted to use this type of equipment. When refueling equipment or vehicles powered by internal combustion engines, shut off the engine and don't smoke. Don't refuel equipment inside a building unless you first get approval from the Plant Protection Department, and then you may only bring 5 gallons of fuel in an approved container into the building. Safe use of ladders and scaffolding is important. Use only non-metallic ladders that are in good condition. Defective ladders must be taken out of service and destroyed. Do not use ladders in a horizontal position as a walkway, platform, or scaffold. Straight and extension ladders must have non-skid feet and be tied off at the top if possible. If the ladder cannot be secured at the top, then the bottom needs to be either blocked from movement or held by a safety watch. The top must extend at least 3 feet above the landing level to which you are climbing. Use the 3-point contact system when climbing up or down the ladder. Use a rope to hoist tools and materials to your workstation. When working from a ladder, face the ladder and keep both feet on the rungs. If both hands must be used to perform work, you must utilize fall protection equipment, tying off to an adjacent fixed structure that meets anchor point requirements. Fall protection must be used anytime you are exposed to falls from heights of 6 feet or greater. That distance may be less if working above certain hazards, such as open tanks, rebar, etc. Do not stand on the top step or cap of a step ladder. A step ladder must be completely unfolded when used. Do not use them as a straight ladder by leaning them against a vertical surface. No scaffold shall be erected, moved, dismantled, or altered except under the supervision of competent persons. Scaffolds shall be capable of supporting, without failure, at least 4 times the maximum intended load. All scaffolding shall meet the OSHA requirements. Use rolling scaffolds only on level, smooth surfaces, or secure the wheels in wood or iron channel runners. Do not ride on a rolling scaffold. Scaffold must have good footing, locked wheels, secure decking, secure locking pins, and bracing that is in place. Gas cylinders must have valve caps in place during transportation and storage. Cylinders should be stored in well-ventilated areas, away from flammable or combustible materials, and away from moving or falling objects. Hoisting of cylinders shall not be done by magnets or choker slings. Cylinders shall be transported in a secured, upright position. If a special wrench is required to open and close a cylinder, the wrench shall be left in place while the cylinder is in use. Locate tanks far enough away from the work to avoid sparks and slag on torch hoses or regulators. Provide shields to protect the tanks. Never take tanks inside a confined space. Any use of a cutting torch inside a confined space requires a diligent check for any gas leakage from the hoses or torch head. Backflow preventers must be in place on torch hoses or regulators. The use of compressed air for tools and cleaning requires special safety precautions. Air hoses larger than 1/2 inch inside diameter must be equipped with an excess airflow valve at the source of air supply. Pneumatic power tools shall be secured to the hose or whip by some positive means to prevent the tool from becoming accidentally disconnected from the hose. Never point compressed air nozzles at others or use the air to clean your clothing. Compressed air used for cleaning purposes must be fitted with special nozzles to effectively reduce the air pressure at the nozzle to 30 psi or less should the nozzle become deadheaded. Many types of vehicles are used at Warrick operations, from small scooters to large mobile cranes. Mobile equipment of any kind creates potential hazards, so always stop, look, and listen for approaching vehicles. Before operating an industrial vehicle here at Warrick operations, be sure to conduct a pre-operational vehicle check at the start of each shift or before the vehicle is used during the shift. When driving a vehicle at Warrick, observe the plant's speed limit, which is 15 miles per hour on plant roads unless otherwise posted. Inside buildings, the speed limit is 6 miles per hour. Lower speeds are required in congested areas. Always watch for pedestrians. All enclosed cab vehicles must have a revolving yellow light on top of the cab or be escorted by someone on foot as they drive inside buildings. Scooters and other vehicles with an overall cab height of 6 feet or less requires a SWAT safety flag. All riders must be seated in an approved seat and must also use seat belts when available. All vehicles must have an audible operational warning device at the operator's station. In other words, a horn. Also, all motorized vehicles operated with the operator's view obstructed to the rear must have a reverse signal alarm audible above the surrounding noise levels, or an observer to signal to the operator that it is safe to back up the vehicle. For some jobs, It's necessary to operate mobile equipment near energized high-voltage lines and equipment. Alcoa's mandatory safety engineering standard, 32.60, applies and must be followed. At Warrick operations, high-voltage installations are generally 138 kilovolts and 15 kilovolts. When lifting loads near these areas, keep the equipment, lifting cables, and the load at least 10 feet away from 15 kilovolt installations and 15 feet away from 138 kilovolt installations. When in transit, mobile equipment and cranes with no load and boom lowered must not come within 4 feet or closer to 15 kilovolt power sources and no closer than 10 feet to 138 kilovolt sources. As an operator of mobile cranes and fork trucks, don't handle loads above people. Don't use cherry pickers or boomed cranes for lifting people unless this is a last resort and special procedures are in place. Consult with the Alcoa Safety Department before lifting personnel in this manner. Other moving vehicles include electric overhead cranes. Use warning signals freely at passageways and work areas, and do not allow anyone to ride on the load or hook. If you are working in the path of an overhead crane or using mobile equipment in the path of an overhead crane, take one of the following precautions. Preferably, lock out the crane or the crane rail collector system. If you can't lock out the crane, install temporary rail stops and flags on the crane rails using the approved Alcoa procedures. If you can't lock out the crane or install temporary rail stops, have a safety person ride in each crane cab or with each operator. Make sure there is direct communication between the safety persons and the work crew, such as radios, lights, horns, etc. When working near crane rail collectors, lock out the collector system if possible, or insulate the collector rail. Always get approval before starting work. When using the crane as a work platform, lock out the crane if possible. If it is necessary to move the crane during work, keep the pendant or transmitter on the bridge with the work crew. Make sure other cranes in the same bay are isolated from the crane being worked on. Also, you must use proper fall protection if you are working beyond the limits of guardrails and other fall prevention devices. When working around electricity, always assume the equipment is energized unless proven otherwise. Obtain a clearance if you are working in high voltage substation areas over 750 volts AC phase to phase and fenced substation areas on electrical distribution towers and similar structures. If any work is to be done in close proximity to electrical equipment, such as cable, bus, transformers, insulators, etc., which have open electrified connections, a job safety review will be held prior to starting work. When performing demolition, removal, replacement, new installation type work where exposed electrical wiring could pose a hazard, follow the safety rules for electrical wire isolation. This requires the proper isolation of exposed electrical wires that have a potential to be energized. The exposed wiring is required to either be removed if not needed, or protected, taped, insulated if the wiring is to be reused. Power sources are to be disconnected, locked out, tagged out, and any exposed wiring properly secured. If the system is to be energized with the unused wiring in place, the wiring must be properly insulated and concealed in conduit, junction boxes, or otherwise isolated from contact. All rolling mills and some production centers are equipped with X-ray equipment. You need proper authorization before working on this equipment. Be careful not to place any part of your body between the radiation source and receiver. When rigging loads with slings, be sure to use good rigging practices. All slings must be periodically inspected and are to be given a visual inspection prior to each use and during a lift under severe conditions to protect the slings and be sure the load and slings are compatible for the weight being lifted. Use softeners at edges and corners to avoid undue stress on cables and slings. Always use tag lines to prevent unintentional swinging of loads. Be sure hooks have safety latches if the load has the potential to become unhooked, and stay out from under lifted loads. Many of our projects start with excavation or surface removal. Don't begin any excavation without a digging permit. The permits are available through the design department and are required anytime digging will be greater than 2 inches below ground level. The permits will help to identify buried hazards. If you create a hole, you must barricade the area. Excavations 5 feet or deeper must be shore, benched, or sloped for stability. Excavated materials must be placed at least 2 feet away from the edge of the excavation. Also, provide ladders for any excavation 4 feet or deeper, and make sure there's a ladder within 25 feet of anyone working in the excavation. Work on plant roofs requires special consideration for fall prevention and protection. Depending on the nature and location of the work, a perimeter protection system may need to be established. The first type of system is called a warning line system. This is a barrier erected on a roof to warn employees that they are approaching an unprotected roof side or edge. This also designates an area of a low roof where work may take place inside the barrier without the use of guardrails, body harnesses, or a safety net system, provided there are no fall hazards located within the warning line system. The warning line must be established at least 6 feet from the exposed edge of the roof, allowing persons to approach no closer than 6 feet to the edge. The second type of perimeter protection is a motion stopping system. This can be standard guard railing, safety nets, or fall protection using a full body harness. A motion stopping system should be used in the following situations: when work must occur within 6 feet of the roof edge, or when motorized equipment must operate closer than 10 feet to the edge, perpendicular to the travel direction of the equipment, or closer than 6 feet parallel to the travel direction. Another type of motion stopping device could be likened to a leash, which allows a person to only travel so far toward the edge of a roof or opening, but does not allow a person to travel far enough to go over the edge. Another system that may be allowed is the controlled access zone. This system is typically used for leading edge work, with the controlled access zone defined by a control line or other means that restricts access to everyone except designated persons. The last and least desired system is a safety monitoring system. A competent person is appointed by the employer to monitor the safety of other employees as they work on a roof. The safety monitor is to warn employees when it appears that they are unaware of a fall hazard or they are acting in an unsafe manner. This system will not be used if motorized equipment is involved. Use of the safety monitoring system is generally not allowed and requires the prior approval of the Alcoa Safety Department. The most desired system involves guardrail barricades, which meet the OSHA requirements for guardrails. This system is most effective around roof perimeters, pit or floor openings, and excavations. All temporary roof or floor openings must be guarded or constantly attended by someone while the cover is removed or the hole is open. Hole covers must be substantial enough to withstand any anticipated load and must be cleated or fastened in such a way to avoid dislodging of the cover. The cover also must either be highlighted with paint or have the word hole or cover distinctly marked on the cover. In the absence of guardrails, fall protection must be considered if employees are exposed to falls of greater than 6 feet.
Don't throw or drop material from an elevated area without permission from the Alcoa Safety Department. Materials that will be dropped more than 20 feet to any point must be in an enclosed chute. Don't leave open tar buckets, mops, etc. on roofs overnight.
Also, tie down or otherwise secure material that could become airborne should winds become gusty. The above guidelines are not all-inclusive of procedures that may be required. When in doubt, contact your supervisor and the Alcoa Safety Department. Fall protection is a concern throughout industry. Anytime you are exposed to a fall potential of 6 feet or more, less than 6 feet if you're above certain hazards, regardless of your elevation, fall prevention or fall protection is required. Certain hazards where the fall may be less than 6 feet but still require protection include, but are not limited to, working above open-top tanks and vessels, moving machinery, water, and objects that impose impalement hazards. Whenever a fall hazard exists, you must utilize one of the following methods of fall protection or fall prevention: standard guard railing, safety nets, motion stopping devices, safety monitoring system, or personal fall protection system. Whichever system is chosen, protection should be offered not only at the work location, but also while climbing to and from the work location. Only full body harnesses are approved at Warrick operations for personal fall arrest systems. Body belts are not approved. Choose an anchor point that meets the 5,000-pound static load requirement and also limits your free fall to 3 feet or less if possible. All lanyards shall be shock absorbing and double locking to prevent accidental rollout. While wrapping a lanyard around objects and tying or fastening the lanyard back onto itself is not forbidden, it is not the best practice. Utilize devices designed for wrapping around I-beams and other structural members, and then fasten the lanyard to those devices. There are many confined spaces at Warrick operations. Each space should have a sign such as this, advising of a confined space, and the need for a pre-entry checklist to be completed prior to each entry. This checklist will help determine whether or not a confined space permit is required prior to work in the space. Many spaces require specific safety procedures to be reviewed and followed. Do not enter a confined space unless you have been trained to safely do so. Some areas of training that might be necessary are use of fall protection equipment, respiratory equipment, how to operate mechanical rescue equipment, MSDS and hazard communication information, lockout, tagout, to name a few. It is possible that not all confined spaces are identified. You must be aware of what constitutes a confined space and check with the Alcoa Safety Department when in doubt. Also be aware that your work may create a confined space during installation. During that phase of construction, the area may need to be treated as a confined space with the implementation of special safety precautions. There are 2 highly hazardous chemicals used at Warrick in sufficient quantities to warrant your attention. Chlorine, a yellowish-green, heavier-than-air gas, is used in the ingot plant to isolate impurities from the molten aluminum. Sulfur dioxide is used in Building 877 on the northwest side of the plant to process chromium waste. Both sulfur dioxide and chlorine are irritating to the breathing passages. Prolonged exposure could result in extensive lung damage. If your work involves entering restricted areas where either of these chemicals are in use, you will need additional training, including the use of an escape respirator. In the unlikely event of an accidental chemical release, a chemical warning alarm will sound, and you will be advised to evacuate the area. The chemical warning emergency alarm system generates a high-low sound, similar to a European police siren, followed by voice instructions. Should a release occur, move upwind, away from the area. Another alarm that may require your attention is the fire alarm. This alarm involves a slow whoop, which may be followed by voice instructions. If you are in the immediate vicinity of a fire, you will only hear the slow whoop sound, and you must evacuate away from the fire area. If you are in another area of the plant, you would hear the alarm and then a voice message describing the location of the fire, plus any instructions specific to the area where you are located. In some areas, you may have to move closer to the speaker to clearly hear the voice instructions. The final audio alarm that you might encounter is the severe weather alarm. This alarm is a steady tone and is used to indicate the possible presence of severe weather in the area, more specifically, a tornado warning. Should you hear this alarm, look for the nearest shelter and evacuate to that shelter as soon as possible.
As you can see, there are a lot of safety rules and procedures you need to know about. But just knowing about them isn't enough. You have to follow safety rules and procedures day in and day out, and be aware of activities going on around you. If you have any questions or concerns about safety here at Warrick Operations, contact your supervisor, superintendent, or the Alcoa representative for your job. Remember, by working safely, you do your job better. You protect yourself and your co-workers from injury. And best of all, you return home to your family in safe and sound condition.